In today's video, we are going to improve your autofocus. Hi everyone and welcome to Palditech. Today we are talking about autofocus and we're going to improve it. Well, you're going to improve it. I'm going to give you some tips. Now, if I come across a really important tip for you that I think you should use, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the red light. Now, most Fujifilm cameras have three different focus categories: M, C, and S. Now, I used to call them focus modes, but there's already a bunch of settings that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and they're called focus modes. So I want to keep these ones separate and distinct, so we're going to call these focus categories. On most Fujifilm cameras, you'll find them either on the front, sometimes on the side, or in the case of cameras like the XS20, you'll see them right here in the AF/MF menu. So the first of the three is manual focus. And I know you all know what it is, but just remember that manual is autofocus completely turned off. I mean, think of it that way. We're not going to talk about it for the rest of the video. So that one's gone. There's two left. The next one is single autofocus, otherwise known as AFS. This one is extremely common. So when you go ahead and put your camera in AFS, and then you go and half press down your shutter release button, as soon as you do that, the first thing your camera is going to do is acquire focus right on your subject. The camera will lock focus on that subject as long as you keep holding down halfway the shutter release button. And the AFS mode works great if your subject stays still. But what do you do if your subject decides to start moving around? And that's where the final focus category comes into play, which is AFC. When you put your camera in AFC, as soon as you half press down the shutter release button, the camera focuses in on the subject, but now it will continually keep that subject in focus. All right, that's the bare basics of the three Fujifilm focus categories: manual, AFS, and AFC. So moving on now to another very important autofocus tool is the focus frame. And you can recognize your focus frame because it's green. It's usually a green square. Here's the important thing. Only those objects or subjects or anything in your scene that are inside the boundaries of that box, that is where your camera is going to apply the autofocus. And you need to be sure that that green focus frame is over your subject. There's exceptions to this. We'll get to those. But for now, the focus frame is that which surrounds what you want to have in focus. Okay, the next thing you need to know, and you might want to write this one down. The smaller that you make your focus frame, you know, the green thing, the smaller you make it, the more precision and accuracy your camera's autofocus will have. And the larger that you make your frame, the faster your autofocus will acquire and lock onto your subject. However, the less accurate it may be. So now you want to go into your menu. Oh, one thing before you go in here, you need to make sure that you do not have your camera in manual focus. If you do, a lot of these menu items are going to be grayed out. So for now, go ahead and make sure that it's in AFS. Go into your menu, into the AF/MF section, and we are going to go right into AF mode. And right inside this area are three very important settings. I say three, even though you see four here, because the bottom one, what it does is basically provide another option to get to these other three AF mode settings. If you'd like me to talk about it in a future Fast Friday, let me know. But for now, it's unimportant. I want to stick with the important autofocus ones. And those would be single point, zone, and wide tracking. I'm going to give you information that, if you don't know it, is going to help you tremendously. First, single point. When you put your AF mode in single point, you'll see a green box appear in your scene right here. Inside that green box is your focus frame. And yes, you can adjust the size of that green box focus frame, but not a whole lot, just a little bit. On most Fujifilm cameras, you do that using the joystick. For now, let's keep it as large as we can. But as you can see, it really doesn't get that large. Next is zone. Now, zone is very similar to single point, but instead of a little box, it is now a movable block that's a lot larger than single point. And And when you half press down the shutter release button, you can see it's kind of calculating stuff. Basically, it's a big zone block that you can resize and move around. And inside it has multiple little single point focus points. Now, just like single point, this zone block and everything inside it is what your camera is going to be looking at and providing autofocus for. Anything that is outside that zone box will be ignored. And finally, we have wide tracking. Now, when you first turn it on, you don't see much, except if you look right here, you can kind of see the edges. You see that? If you half press down the shutter release button, this focus mode uses the entire frame, and it does this based on the color, contrast, and shape of your subject. So when you use wide tracking, you are allowing the camera to do a lot more thinking, okay? We are now going to combine what you've already learned and take these two right here, otherwise known as AFS and AFC, and mix and match them with these three autofocus modes right here. Let's start now with single point combined with AFS. Using single point with AFS is very straightforward. All you need is a stationary subject, and then just half press down the shutter release button. Your camera will lock focus on the subject the entire time that you're holding the shutter release button halfway down. And of course, the most common benefit of doing it this way would be to recompose your shot. However, if instead you combine single point with AFC, it's going to behave differently. And what's going to happen is that instead of your focus being locked on, right, and frozen as you're half holding down the shutter release button, your camera is going to continue to focus the entire time on your subject that is inside that green focus frame. And this is very helpful if your subject is moving backwards and forwards, for example. Check this out. Have a look at this. Still in focus. Still in focus. Obviously, this combination we just went through is not good for subjects that are moving all over the place, especially side to side. The minute it steps out of the focus frame, it's blurry. And so because of that, we go to the next combination, and that would be zone with AFS. Now, this combination is very similar to single point with AFS, okay? I mean, it's almost identical. Your autofocus will lock onto the subject, and it will remain locked the entire time as long as you are holding down halfway the shutter release button. But just like before, if you half press down the shutter release button and you do not have your focus frame, the green part, over your subject, it will not be in focus. Try a little bit more. There we go. He's not fully in the frame, but his arm is, so that counts. And of course, remember that on newer Fujifilm cameras, you can actually change the size and the shape of your zone focus block. And I think that's actually a good subject for a future Fast Friday video. Now, if instead you combine zone mode with AFC, okay, it'll do the same thing we just discussed with single point AFC, meaning that the entire time you're half pressing down the shutter release button, the camera is constantly looking to acquire focus. I've kind of found it handy for shooting birds with really busy backgrounds like trees and foliage and things like that, not against sky, but with a busy background like a forest or something. But now we're going to talk about the two combinations that cause the most confusion for people. And that would be wide tracking. Wide tracking. It literally is an autofocus mode that does these two very different things depending upon what you combine it with, okay? So if you combine wide tracking with AFS, your autofocus will turn into what is called wide mode, okay? You need to remember this, wide mode. There is no tracking. It is locking in on what the camera thinks is the important subject, okay? And it's doing that by calculating all kinds of things and coming up with where are the high contrast areas. Oh, there's one, boom. And it focuses in on that. And it begins to do that when you half press down the shutter release button. For example, I'll try it right now. Boom. Half press down the shutter release button, and it nailed it exactly. I'll half press down the shutter release button again. Uh-oh, didn't totally get it now, did it? And that's what I wanted you to see, actually, because you need to remember that with wide, okay, in particular, if you don't have enough contrast, if you don't have enough light, this thing will crap out, okay? As you just saw. It's a little tricky, but I have a really good solution for you that I'm gonna tell you about, but we're gonna first talk about our final combination. And that would be putting wide tracking in combination with AFC, continuous. Okay, so when you now have it set up like this, your camera's autofocus system is now in full tracking mode, looking throughout the entire frame and then finding your subject and tracking it. Watch how it focuses on the subject in the foreground, and then it'll jump to, there it is, it's boom, it jumps to the one in the background. Remember that with tracking, you don't pick it, your camera picks it. And once it locks in, assuming it doesn't think it should find something else, it will just follow that subject. In other words, it's able to analyze and track the depth of your subject, as well as left, right, and up-down movement. And because of that, you might want to use this combo if you're shooting subjects with unpredictable action, okay? You would never use this combo for shooting, static, non-moving subjects. Now, because wide tracking combined with AFC is a lot more complicated than when it's combined with AFS, Fujifilm provides you with one final group of settings. These right here, AFC custom settings. They are the single most important autofocus settings on the camera, okay? And on pretty much all Fujifilm cameras, they're located in the AF/MF section right near AF mode and focus mode right here. I cannot go through every single situation and talk about which one is which. If you're not sure which one to use, I think number 2 is one of the best. I'll give you one suggested setting you could try for number 6. Go ahead and put tracking sensitivity right at number 2. Speed tracking sensitivity at 0, and zone area switching to auto. Try that one out as sort of an introduction. And if you do want me to make a full video on the various different settings for what shooting situation and so forth, please let me know and I'll do that. But we need to move on because we are now about to talk about what I think is the most confusing part of autofocus now, the new AI face detection and subject detection. How do those new autofocus features work with the autofocus modes that we had just been talking about? We're in AF/MF, and if you scroll down, you'll see it right here. Now, if your camera doesn't have these included, well, just watch the video anyway, and you might learn something. Fujifilm, I think, has made this more confusing than it needs to be, all right? For example, with subject detection, there are additional ones that are not listed in here. For example, drones. You're supposed to just magically know that if you are shooting drones and you want to have that recognized as a subject, you have to choose airplane. And I know that makes sense, but why not? It doesn't matter. And you'll also notice here that there's no human for subject detection, which is also very confusing. If you have subject detection setting set, and then you decide that instead of shooting an animal, you're going to shoot a human. So you go into face eye detection setting and you turn it on. Again, we're not going to get too much into the details, but for now, choose eye auto. What it'll do is focus on the eye that's closest to the camera. When you do that, look, subject detection setting automatically turned off. Only one of those can be on at the same time. Your camera won't allow it. We have just put face eye detection on. Subject detection is now off. What happens now? How does this all fit in? If I go back, I have all of the same options that I did before. Single point, zone, wide tracking, blah, 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 blah. Even AFC custom setting. Everything's there. Say, for example, that you have your camera set to AFC and you have single point. That combination. If you then go into your menu and turn on face eye detection, what do you think is going to happen to the autofocus? Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video. I'm just kidding. If it detects a face anywhere in the frame, it will focus on that face even if it is outside the focus area. This is the subject I want to be in focus. So I put it like, right here, say, okay? Then I go to half press down the shutter release, and Yoda is not the thing the camera cares about anymore. It's me, because I have it set to face eye. In other words, if your camera detects a face, Even if it's outside the green frame box, it will say the heck with the box and it'll focus right in on the face. It'll override it. Face and eye detection take priority. Okay, so in this case, I put the camera in wide tracking. I chose number 4 for AFC custom settings, and I went ahead and turned on automobile subject detection. The reason I'm doing this is because although I'm in wide tracking, you see the square right here in the middle of the screen? That will appear if you have subject detection or face eye detection turned on. And an object must actually touch through it in order to activate the object detection. Watch these cars. Right now it's just sitting there until a car passes through it. Bam! You see that? It caught it and then it takes over. Same thing here. Once it catches one automobile, it then is okay. And once it's over, it then goes back to just being the square again. I'm in wide and I have automobile subject detection, which will supersede the other settings. It's not working because it's not passing through that little square right there. But as long as I have the square where the subject will be in the general area, there it goes, just like that. Which begs the question, can you make the square any larger? Yes, you can. Put it to zone and then make the zone square large enough to really cover the area where those subjects are going to be passing through. See, have a look at this. It's catching all of them. See that? Consider zone as an option if you need to make that area it needs to pass through larger. In some ways, zone could be better than wide tracking if you have subject detection turned on. So I'm going to reward anyone that has stuck around this long, and I'm going to give you a tip. Have your camera in AFC mode, put it into wide tracking, and then turn on face detection. AFC, wide tracking, face detection. If you have not tried that yet, I think you're going to find that your face detection autofocus will be noticeably improved. Try it out. Now, please note that we did not cover autofocus when shooting video, okay? We only talked about stills, and that is a very different setup than what I told you today. And I've actually been thinking now for a while about having one video, a long video, with chapters, but one video to rule them all for all of the various combinations and focus modes for Fujifilm cameras. Well, anyhow, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful, or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. And I'll see you in a new video next week. Take care.